When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Brett. User, One Step Power. Posted, November 8th, 1997.
I saw Brett today. He looks good. For the first time in a long time, his hair was gelled and he was wearing one of his nice suits, the blue one with pinstripes. Best of all, he was actually smiling. I can't remember when I last saw that. Definitely back before he crashed his Miata into that fountain in the middle of his subdivision. It wasn't losing the car that hurt. He could more than afford to buy another, even if insurance wouldn't cover him. No, it was what it did to Renee, his wife. She'd borne up under a lot because of his drinking. Things you can only ask of people you love, and things even they shouldn't have to do. But there's only so much embarrassment you can ask someone to endure on your behalf, and that was Renee's limit. She knew that from then until they moved, one of them died or she left, she'd always be the wife of the guy who drove his car into the fountain. So she left and he spiraled. The worst thing you can do as a religious person is believe God is as judgmental as your parents. I really believe that. Even though I may not have grown up with any kind of faith, I've come around to the idea that there might be a higher power out there willing to lend a guiding hand if you can just stop trying to control everything for a few minutes. Brett's family had Jesus right from the get-go, and as with an unfortunate number of folks who wrapped themselves in the Lord's glory, it didn't make them better people. His father was cruel and controlling. His mother just wanted to stay out of his father's way, and so the version of God Brett came to believe in was a combination of the two. Often absent, then wrathful and intolerant when he was around. It contributed a lot to his problems. No matter what he did, it was never enough. That's actually an important thing to remember. Brett was very successful. After the fountain thing, once Renee had left, I went to pick him up for dinner at his place. A thick-necked security guard asked to see my ID before lifting the gate, and I drove past row after row of perfect mini-mansions with immaculate lawns. Even the poor fountain was already in the process of being rebuilt, whereas it still takes my landlord days to find out why my hot water won't work. Pulling up to his house, I remember thinking, holy fuck, you make more in a year than I'll make in my life. Before catching myself, what he had or didn't have made no difference. We were still hanging out in the same church basements once or twice a week, sipping black coffee out of paper cups and eating stale cookies. There were 8 of us who'd been going to those meetings long enough that we knew each other's stories by heart. Sometimes it might even be just us in those wood-paneled rooms, chairs squeaking across the linoleum floor. Toward the end, we looked after Brett on more than one of those nights. He had clearly showed up to the meeting smashed, slurring his way through a reading, and really, if there had been anyone new there, we'd have to make him leave. As it was, we never really knew what to do, but at least he was with us and not out there, doing something that would cause him more grief. He wanted to get clean. That's the shittiest thing. Sometimes you get guys in meetings who are there because they've been given an ultimatum. Clean up or lose your job or your wife or your kids or some combo of the three. You can always tell who they are because they act like they're above it. Brett was willing to do the work, no matter what that work was. That drive was part of the problem. It always had to be him at the wheel. Even when he really started to slide, he thought the answer was more meetings, more reading, more rehab. He'd actually just been to rehab not long before he died. I think I was at work when he called me. Right away, I could hear he was drunk. It wasn't slurring, but the opposite, an over-pronunciation, like he thought if he nailed every single word, it wouldn't be obvious. I was straight with him, same as he would have been with me. I told him, if you don't do something, you're gonna fucking die. I really thought he heard me because he checked himself into an inpatient facility the next day. 30 days, he was clean. 30 days after that, I got the call. Brett was dead. Organ failure. It hurt, man. It fucking hurt. When I first saw him, I didn't know what to think. It was a cold, snowy Wednesday in January, and I'd been on my way home from work, thinking about a dozen different things at once. Waiting for the light to turn, something moved out of the corner of my left eye. Turning toward the sidewalk, a wave of unreality washed over me because there was Brett, pale and hard to see, but definitely there, sitting on a bench as flakes drifted down all around him. It only lasted a moment. He looked sad and lost, and however much it hurt losing him, seeing him like this hurt even more. I couldn't bring myself to tell the others, wouldn't even know how to start the conversation, really. None of them are ghost guys, and neither was I at the time. My attitude towards that kind of thing was that I spent so much time making sure I hang on to this life that there isn't much room left in my head for what might come after. Speaking of life, it went on too quickly, the way it always does, and I just about managed to write off my vision on the bench. Then, a year later, there he was again. This time, I was on my back porch, feet up, reading some terrible paperback and drinking a coffee. I didn't even have to rely on the corner of my vision because he walked right up the steps and looked straight at me. Again, it didn't last long, just enough for him to give me a wan smile before fading away. I wrestled with those visions for years. Two ghosts, subtly different from one another. Was it some kind of late-onset hallucination left over from my own wild days, or is there really some place we go when we die? A place where we're maybe not magically healed the way the preachers want us to think, but we get another opportunity to fix what's wrong with us, to fill the holes left in us by life. If you'd asked me this 10 years ago, I'd have said you were crazy. Then I saw Brett that third time, smiling and happy. I can't think of any other answer. He waved to me as if to say goodbye. Or maybe just see you soon.
Subject, the hypnosis thing. User, starred 6Z2. Posted October 11th, 1995.
Something happened during a sleepover at my friend Bailey's house last summer. No one believes me, not my mom or my dad or even my brother Chris, but it was real. Maybe someone reading this will understand. Until last summer and what I've started calling the hypnosis thing, we would always go to Bailey's for sleepovers. Her dad does something with computers, so they live in a huge house up on Callahan Road. It's got something like 5 bedrooms, a den in the basement, an indoor pool, all kinds of stuff. It's like a mansion compared to where we live. Her mom is also pretty cool and leaves us alone when we stay over. Sometimes we'll stay up to 3 or 4 in the morning and no one bothers us. On the night of the hypnosis thing, we stayed up till around 1:30 in the morning. It was me, Bailey, and our friend Ashley. You know how when you have sleepovers, you hit a certain part of the night where you get a second wind? That had happened, and so we were wide awake watching these gross commercials for telephone dating. They show all these girls dancing in nightclubs, and then some guy in a suit comes on to say how rejection stinks and the girls on the phone won't ever reject you. All I can say is, if that's what nightclubs look like, I don't understand what all the excitement is about. They look crowded, loud, and mostly full of women in crop tops. None of that appeals to me. When we got bored with infomercials, we started reading Bailey's mom's papers, like The Star and National Enquirer. One of them, I think it was The Star, had a whole page about hippie stuff, like how tired people can draw power from the earth to give them more energy, or how hypnosis could take away your stress. I wasn't tired or stressed, but drawing power from the earth sounded pretty cool, kind of like superpowers, so I said we should try the exercise. Bailey's up for pretty much everything. She can't wait till she can go to nightclubs, so she agreed right away. Ashley wasn't as into it, but she went along because we were so into the idea. I lay flat on the ground and Bailey started rubbing my temples and saying things like, "You are getting very sleepy," and so of course I laughed, and Bailey laughed too, then lightly hit my arm and told me to take it seriously, so I tried to stop goofing around and relax into it while she read the steps from the magazine. I remember her telling me to picture a door in my body, then to imagine that door opening. I did as she said, imagining a heavy metal door like a bank vault slowly swinging open. She then said I should imagine pulling electricity up from the ground through that door, and I did that too. Seeing these purple bolts, I blacked out. From awake to asleep like someone had thrown a light switch. When I woke up, I wasn't on the floor anymore. Instead, I was on the sofa and my friends were gone. I didn't know what time it was or how long I'd been asleep, but I was annoyed they'd left me, so I got up to go look for them. They were upstairs talking to Bailey's dad, who was trying to calm them down. When I approached them, they almost looked afraid of me, but wouldn't say why. It was Ashley who finally told me what had happened. She said, after the part where Bailey and I were laughing, I started shaking so badly they thought I was having a seizure. At first, they assumed it was a joke, but I kept shaking until I suddenly stopped. Then, I apparently began giggling in a terrible, low voice. According to Ashley, I spoke in a voice that was too deep to be my own, and I told them they were pretty little witches now, but they would all burn in hell with Bailey's grandfather, who had died a year before. According to Ashley, Bailey thought I was faking and got angry, but when she tried to touch me, the voice, deep and slow like a man's, said that if she wanted to live, she would keep her hands to herself. Then, she said I started shaking again, and when Ashley reached out to touch me, I grabbed her arm and said in a horrible tone of voice, "Your mother is sick." That finished them, and is when they ran upstairs. I have no memory of any of this, but believe them because it changed our friendship. We're still in touch, but less close than they were, some of which I blame on the fact that Ashley's mom was diagnosed with a serious illness not long after this. I don't think I had anything to do with that, but still, Ashley has treated me differently ever since.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.